In a world full of monsters, a true numerical anomaly has appeared. Our story begins with a choice. You've crossed over, and the system demands that you select one of the following abilities as your cheat code. 1. Time Overlord. 2. Infinite Space. 3. Destiny's Guidance. 4. Causal Manifestation. But then we see a fifth option, consisting of just two simple words, Great Strength. It looks completely out of place. He stares at that fifth option and falls into deep thought. Just how great must this strength be to earn such a blunt title? He simply has to find out. And so, without a moment's hesitation, he chooses the fifth option. He is transported to a fantasy world where the sun is hot enough to cook a man alive. Instead of being a favored son of destiny or a wealthy heir, our protagonist, Ling Long, finds himself at the very bottom of the Qingyun sect. With no spiritual roots or background, he spends his days farming, hauling water, and being scolded, all on an empty stomach. As his belly growls, he begins to wonder if he'll be the first transmigrator to die of hunger in an immortal sect. But then, a cold mechanical voice explodes in his mind. Detecting the host's intents will to survive. Absolute strength system binding. Success. Starter pack granted. Please choose one of the following. 5 primal laws as your initial talent. In the next instant, the entire world falls silent. The wind stops blowing, and the clouds freeze in place. Birds are suspended midair, and even the dust hangs motionless. His heart races. He knows this is no hallucination. To be honest, it's about time. The late-arriving cheat code for our transmigrator has finally appeared. 5 orbs of light float before him. 1. Time Law, to control the past and future. 2. Space Law, to travel through dimensions and cross the sea of stars in a single thought. 3. The Law of Destiny, to manipulate the threads of fate where all living beings are but chess pieces. 4. The Law of Causality, to remain untouched by all worldly karma. Each one is flashier than the last, boasting an intimidating level of prestige. Any one of them looks capable of destroying heaven and earth. His eyes are wide with wonder, and he's tempted to just close them and pick one at random. But right then, his stomach growls again. Yes, of course. That sound drags him right out of his dream of ruling the heavens and back to reality. He looks at his sun-blackened arms, and then at the ground. At the patch of soil he still hasn't finished tilling. Suddenly, his thinking becomes very clear. Can reversing time till the fields for him? No. Can spatial teleportation carry water? Not really. Destiny and causality sound impressive, but what he needs is a full meal, not a cryptic proverb. And so, he shifts his gaze to the final option. It is the most inconspicuous white orb of light, lacking any grand spectacle, showing only 2 simple words. The words Great Strength appear before him, and suddenly, his eyes light up. To him, great sounds perfect. With that kind of power, one swing of the hoe could till a massive plot of land. He could carry twice as much water, and a better harvest means more spirit stones. And more stones, well, that means meat buns. Time, space, destiny, and causality are all pushed to the back of the line as he reaches out without a single hesitation. He makes his choice, Great Strength. The system responds immediately, noting that the host has chosen. The Great Tao is simple. Power is the engine of all things. It congratulates him on obtaining the source of strength. Then, the system functions are transferred, and it begins to self-destruct, wishing him a pleasant meal. Before he can even react, a warm current flows through his limbs and bones. Then, the mechanical voice vanishes completely, as if it had never existed at all. The frozen world returns to life. The cicadas buzz in his ears again, the wind blows, and the clouds drift by once more. He stands there dazed for a long time, feeling quite honestly like he's been scammed by a cosmic door-to-door salesman. The system gave him one choice and then vanished without so much as a customer service line. As his frustration builds, he hears a familiar, shrill, and mocking voice from nearby. Oh, if it isn't our Qingyun sect's resident loafer, Lin Fan? Why are you sitting here waiting for death instead of tending to your fields? The newcomer is the outer sect manager, Li Zhisher, a man who climbed the ranks through flattery and loves nothing more than bullying those at the bottom, like Ling Long. He walks to the edge of the field and looks at the half-dead crops with a look of pure disgust. With a sudden kick, he knocks over the wooden bucket Ling Long just filled. With a loud crash, the well water spills across the dirt, evaporating instantly in the heat. Ling Long's fists clench. He had carried that water 2 miles up the mountain. Li Zhisher ignores his expression entirely, slowly pulling a low-grade spirit stone from his robe, waving it mockingly, and then tucking it back into his sleeve. He claims that because this month's harvest was the worst, the monthly allowance is forfeited. A loafer, he says, should know his place. If you can't even farm, don't dream of cultivation. Maybe in your next life. Ling Long's chest burns with rage, but seeing the stronger disciples behind the manager, he ultimately forces himself to endure it. Li Zhisher snorts with satisfaction and walks away, grumbling about how a mere mortal with no spiritual roots has no business being in an immortal sect. Only after they leave does Ling Long let out a long breath and lean down to pick up his bucket. His fingers brush against a piece of black iron or in the dirt. He tries to toss it aside, a stone famous for being so hard even inner disciples can't break it. Even flying swords struggle to leave a mark on it. Yet the moment he applies pressure, a muffled crack echoes. That fist-sized chunk of black iron ore is crushed into fine powder between his fingertips, falling through his hands like black soot. He freezes in place for a long time, unable to process what just happened. The wind blows the black dust across the ground, and as he looks at his hand, only one thought remains in his mind. His strength seems to have become, well, a bit excessive. Over the next 3 months, we see that this talent is far more absurd than he imagined. It isn't just a sudden burst of brute force. It's as if his power has no ceiling, increasing every single moment. Eating makes him stronger. Sleeping makes him stronger. Swinging his hoe makes him stronger. Even breathing makes him stronger. The 100-pound diamond hoe now feels like a piece of straw in his hand. He lifts a full vat of water with one hand and walks off without breaking a sweat. His speed in tilling the spirit fields is even more terrifying. While others take 3 days to finish a plot, he finishes in half a day. The only thing that hasn't changed is his total lack of spiritual energy. In the eyes of outsiders, he is still just the same ordinary, unremarkable outer disciple, Ling Long. He is perfectly satisfied with this. Strength is enough. As for cultivation or attaining the Tao, those things come second to a full stomach. 3 months later, he stands on the ridge of his field, grinning from ear to ear as he looks at the golden stalks before him. Every grain is heavy, shimmering with spiritual light and a fragrant aroma. This is the harvest he worked desperately for over the last 3 months. By his estimate, it should be worth at least 100 low-grade spirit stones. At that point, he won't just be eating meat buns. He could be extravagant enough to buy 2 bowls and leave one untouched. He squats by the field, planning his future menu, when suddenly a thunderous boom echoes as if the sky itself has been torn open. He looks up in shock. The clear sky has turned pitch black, filled with rolling dark clouds and violet lightning. 2 streaks of light, one black and one green, collide violently 10,000 meters above. Each impact creates a blinding explosion of light, shattering the spiritual energy for miles around. It's a battle between immortals. His expression darkens instantly. Sure enough, a roar descends from the heights as the supreme elder of the Qingyun sect bellows in rage, demanding to know why the old monster Xianming dares to trespass on Qingyun sect territory. From the black light, Xianming gives a sinister laugh, threatening to slaughter every disciple on the mountain unless they hand over the map of immortality. The 2 old monsters clash with world-shaking force. For the sect's cultivators, this is a rare, top-tier battle to witness. But for our friend, this is nothing short of an absolute disaster. Sure enough, after another clash of spells, a visible shockwave of uncontrolled energy sweeps down from the heavens. In the distance, forests are leveled and the outer disciples' quarters erupt in screams of terror. But that violent hurricane is heading straight for Ling Long's fields. His eyes turn red with desperation. Without a second thought, he throws himself onto the ground, spreading his arms to shield the ripening rice with his own body. The shockwave slams into his back like a runaway freight train. Anyone else would have had every bone in their body shattered, but he only wobbles slightly, rooting himself into the earth like a steel nail. While enduring the impact, he silently curses those 2 old monsters and their ancestors. He thought he could just endure it until it passed, but seeing himself losing ground, old monster Xianming grows desperate and summons his life-bound treasure, the heaven-locking compass. A massive phantom compass unfolds in the sky, instantly shrouding the area in a strange and overbearing law of power. The Supreme Elder cries out in alarm. It is a law of causality treasure. In an instant, trees stop growing and begin to wither. Cultivators find their spiritual energy forcibly stripped away, and even the life force of living beings begins to drain. Ling Long feels as though something has been pulled from him, but for a man of his strength, the loss is almost negligible. His crops, however, are not so lucky. The result of spirit rice is to ripen. Under the deprivation of the heaven-locking compass, he watches helplessly as that golden field rapidly turns yellow and shrivels. Finally, with a soft sound, the entire crop turns to ash, slipping through his fingers as the wind blows. In that moment, he falls completely silent. Looking at the gray dust in his hands, it feels as if a string has finally snapped in his mind. That wasn't just rice. That was 3 months of his life, his meat buns, and his entire livelihood for the coming season. High above, Xianming is still laughing maniacally, declaring that everything within 100 miles will be buried along with his compass. Our friend slowly stands up, his head bowed so no one can see his expression. He silently grips his rusty iron hoe, now bent from the shockwave. He doesn't shout, but the loss of his rice thunders in his heart like a physical blow. He takes aim at that black-robed figure, playing God in the sky, assuming the perfect tilling stance he has practiced countless times. Then, with every ounce of strength in his arms, he hurls the hoe upward with a ferocious strike. A visible white vacuum turbulence erupts, tearing through space like paper and leaving jagged black cracks in its wake. Fragments fly everywhere like shattered glass. An old monster Xianming's arrogant smile instantly freezes on his face. His pride and joy, the heaven-locking compass, doesn't even last a second before it shatters under that wave of pure physical force, dissolving into spiritual light. Xianming coughs up a mouthful of blood, his face a mask of pure horror as he gasps. Impossible. What is this? He didn't get to finish. His sentence, that space-tearing turbulence, swallows him whole. There is no explosion, no scream. He and half a mountain simply vanish into a void finer than dust, erased completely from this world. In his final moment, only one terrified thought remained, echoing through his mind. What kind of supreme law is this? Back at the field, Linglong's iron hoe snaps in two with a sharp crack. He looks at the mountain, now sliced perfectly flat with a surface as smooth as a mirror, scratches his head, and tosses the broken handle aside. He mutters a single sentence to himself, likely about the quality of modern tools. With a heavy sigh, he gathers the few pathetic grains of rice left and heads back to his shack. To be honest, destroying half a mountain is far less important to him than what he'll eat tomorrow. However, high above, the supreme elder of the Qingyun sect is utterly dumbfounded. He stares at the mirror-smooth mountain and then at Linglong's retreating back, his entire body trembling, not with fear, but with the sheer ecstasy of a man who has seen a miracle. He suddenly recalls an ancient legend passed down for 10,000 years. The founder of the Qingyun sect wasn't a spellcaster, but a master of an ancient, extinct physical cultivation path. The legend says he never ascended, but stayed hidden within the sect as a mortal to play among the common folk. The Supreme Elder's eyes turn red with excitement. A single strike to shatter a law-based treasure and tear space with pure strength? This is the path of power reached to its absolute limit. There is no doubt in his mind. This senior must be the legendary hidden ancestor of their sect. Trembling, he pulls out a jade slip and screams, "Report to the sect master immediately. Our hidden ancestor has awakened." After shouting, his eyes roll back and he faints from pure shock. Meanwhile, inside the shack, Linglong stares at his meager pile of rice with one question on his mind. Is this even enough for one meal? Soon, Sect Master Chu Tianhua arrives with 12 peak masters. When they see the mountain sliced clean off, the entire group falls into a stunned silence. The peak master of Danding turns pale, while the master of Liang Peak reaches out to sense the residual energy, nearly collapsing on the spot. There is no spiritual energy or magic on the surface, only a pure, terrifying power of annihilation that makes their skin crawl. Even the cracks in the laws of space haven't fully healed yet. This is far beyond what a nascent soul could achieve. It is the true power of a single strike breaking all laws. Chu Tianhua takes a deep breath and follows the path of the battlefield downward, his gaze landing on the only piece of land left untouched, the spirit field. That plot of land was right in the center of the impact and the treasure's range, yet it remains perfectly intact. Even more frightening, the soil's color has turned into a deep, profound black, with spiritual energy so thick it's almost solid. The peak master of the earth vein squats down and gasps in shock. He claims this is 10 times stronger than top-grade spiritual soil. Growing herbs here for a century in a single year wouldn't even be an exaggeration. The peak masters realized that when the ancestor struck, he wasn't protecting himself, he was protecting these crops, and in the process, his divine power unintentionally refined ordinary dirt into supreme treasure land. To protect the mundane while repelling a nascent soul, this is the true style of a grandmaster. The more they think about it, the more logical it seems. Thus, Chu Tianhua immediately orders that today's events be classified as the sect's highest secret. Anyone who leaks this will have their cultivation stripped and be expelled. This place is now ancestral land, and no one is permitted to trespass. The entire sect is to secretly search for the hidden ancestor living as a mortal, but they must only observe from afar and never disturb him. And so, the entire Qingyun sect enters a state of maximum alert because of one man, while we see Linglong sleeping soundly in his shack, completely unaware. The next morning, his heart still aches looking at the empty field, but he quickly cheers himself up. The land is gone, but he can plan again. A man has to eat. He walks to the corner, moves a loose floor tile, and pulls out a small cloth bundle wrapped in layers of oilcloth. Inside, something special is waiting. 3 golden rice seeds lie there, shining as if they were forged from pure gold. He had traded half a steam bun for them 3 years ago, taking them from a starving old farmer who claimed these were ancient golden dragon tooth rice seeds, capable of transforming a person's very bones. At the time, he thought the old man was just boasting, but since the seeds looked so extraordinary, he couldn't bring himself to use them until now. Now, all his hopes rest on these 3 seeds. He walks to the field and notices the soil is glowing black. He grabs a handful, finding it incredibly soft and fertile. It carries an amazing spiritual aura, but he simply assumes that immortal fight last night churned up the earth. He solemnly digs 3 small holes. He buries the 3 golden dragon tooth rice seeds all at once, carefully watering them while looking at this field of renewed hope with a faint smile. Finally, he feels a bit of joy, but it doesn't last long. An incredibly arrogant voice soon shatters the morning silence, mocking our poor protagonist. The voice asks if the useless Ling Fan actually survived yesterday's shockwaves. Looking up, we see Wang Teng, the nephew of the influential Li Jishir. Relying on his uncle's backing and his own foundation establishment cultivation, he acts like a local tyrant within the outer sect. He is a man who is used to getting exactly what he wants, regardless of who he has to step on to get it. Wang Teng declares he's seizing this land, tossing a half-eaten snack as moving expenses. Ling Fan ignores the trash on the ground and speaks calmly. He reminds senior brother Wang that the sect assigned him this land, and he just planted seeds. Wang Teng sneers and raises his foot. Without hesitation, he stomps directly onto the spot where the seeds were buried, grinding his heel back and forth with cruel intent. When he lifts his foot, a smear of bright gold is visible on his sole. The golden dragon tooth rice has been crushed. Ling Fan's body suddenly freezes. Wang Teng, looking down with a sadistic grin, isn't finished yet. He claims a mere mortal doesn't deserve to occupy such precious treasure land. He boasts that crushing the seeds was a favor, then tells Ling Fan to get lost. Ling Fan slowly stands up and brushes the dirt from his hands. There is no anger or panic on his face. He is as calm as a pool of still water. He looks at the gold smear on the shoe and speaks softly. He asks if Wang Teng knows it took him 3 years to save that seed. For a moment, Wang Teng feels an inexplicable sense of dread. That fear quickly turns into embarrassed rage. He draws his longsword, and suddenly, fierce flames rise 3 feet high around him. He mocks the idea of a mortal fighting a cultivator. His followers cheer, recognizing the blazing sword art and assuming Ling Fan is doomed. As the scorching sword energy rushes toward him, Ling Fan simply frowns, feeling the heat on his face. He raises his right hand toward Wang Teng. He delivers a casual slap, a movement so effortless it looks like he's swatting an annoying fly. But as his palm moves, the air itself reacts. The air is instantly compressed and displaced, forming a visible crescent-shaped white shockwave. Wang Teng's impressive-looking flames meet this force. The fire is extinguished instantly without even making a sound. Wang Teng's smug grin freezes on his face just before the impact. The sound of the slap is as sharp as a thunderclap, and for a moment, the entire outer sect seems to fall into a stunned silence. The moment Ling Fan's palm makes contact, Wang Teng is hit by an unrivaled pressure, followed by a terrifying and indescribable kinetic energy. A white sonic boom explodes outward, sending the group of followers flying, while Wang Teng himself doesn't even have time to let out a single scream. He is transformed into a tiny black speck, trailing a long white wake as he breaks the sound barrier, flying straight toward the inner sect of the Qingyan sect. In the blink of an eye, he vanishes over the horizon. His followers, dizzy and bruised, scramble to their feet, looking completely shell-shocked. They look at the sky and then back at Ling Fan, their expressions as if they've seen a ghost. Finally, one of them trembles and asks what just flew away. No one answers. Ling Fan simply shakes his hand as if dusting off something dirty, then turns and kneels down with great care. He carefully digs out the crushed remains of the golden dragon tooth rice, now just a small fragment mixed with golden juice and fading vitality. He sighs, yet solemnly buries it back into the soil anyway. To him, knocking away some senior brother Wang was far less important than this seed's survival. Meanwhile, 5 miles away in the main hall of the inner sect, Sect Master Chu Tianhua and the 12 Peak Masters are still discussing the hidden ancestor. They agree the ancestral land must be a restricted zone, guarded by Golden Core elders to find the ancestor without disturbing his cultivation in the mortal world. As they speak, a thunderous boom suddenly echoes through the center of the hall. The entire structure shakes violently from the impact. Dust rains down from the ceiling as everyone instantly prepares for battle, their spiritual power erupting. But when they see the scene, they all freeze in shock. Embedded deep into the heavy central pillar carved with 9 dragons, we see a person stuck firmly against the stone. His limbs are spread wide, fitting perfectly into the pillar as if someone had slapped him onto it with every ounce of their strength. The man's meridians are shattered and his breath is faint. They can only identify him by his clothes as Wang Teng, the nephew of Elder Zhao Wuji. Recognizing him instantly, Zhao Wuji's eyes turn bloodshot. As a golden core cultivator, his divine sense sweeps out and quickly locks onto the distant spirit field. A moment later, Zhao Wuji's roar vibrates through the entire outer sect, demanding to know what monster dared to harm his kin. He vows to extinguish the culprit's soul. Before his voice even fades, he transforms into a golden streak of light, charging toward Ling Fan's small hut with killing intent. Back at the hut, Ling Fan has just finished watering the half-seed. Hearing the roar from the sky, a vein on his forehead throbs with irritation. He looks up at the approaching golden light, feeling a massive headache coming on. To be honest, he really wonders why another one is already arriving. Ling Fan's brow furrows deeper and deeper as he wonders if anyone will ever let him farm in peace. Suddenly, a golden light tears through the clouds like a falling sun. The light carries the unbridled pressure of a golden core cultivator, descending directly over the spirit field. The newcomer is none other than the punishment elder, Zhao Wuji. His hair stands on end, and his eyes are bloodshot, surrounded by a killing intent so thick it has practically solidified. Even before he touches the ground, the air begins to scream. Ling Fan's newly built shack simply cannot withstand the pressure. With several sharp cracks, the beams snap and the entire hut collapses into a pile of rotten wood. Nearby trees shatter, and the ground splits into a spiderweb of cracks. Only Ling Fan remains standing, looking down at his buried seeds with an expression that is darkening by the second. Zhao Wuji expected to find some fierce monster here, but when his divine sense sweeps over the area, he freezes in confusion. To be honest, he didn't expect this. He senses that Ling Fan's body is completely empty of power. There isn't even a trace of spiritual energy to be found. Not a single drop of spiritual force exists within him. The elder immediately invents the only explanation his mind can handle. Ling Fan must be hiding a god-tier treasure that even a golden core's divine sense cannot pierce. So that's it, Zhao Wuji mutters, his anger turning into a sinister, feverish grin. He reasons that a mere mortal could never have harmed his nephew without such a tool. He demands that Ling Fan hand over the treasure, promising a quick death in return. Ling Fan looks up at him briefly, his patience clearly reaching its limit. He looks back at the soil where his precious seeds rest, thinking to himself that these cultivators must all be suffering from some sort of mental instability. Seeing no response, Zhao Wuji stops pretending and flips his hand to reveal a crimson formation plate. If the boy won't cooperate, he'll simply refine him along with the treasure. The formation plate expands, instantly covering the entire area. With a low hum, the 9-dragon flame array is activated, sealing their fate. A colored light barrier descends like an overturned bowl, trapping Ling Fan and the spirit field inside. A moment later, 9 dragon roars explode simultaneously. An endless sea of fire rises from the ground as 9 massive fire dragons materialize from the array, their claws clashing as they breathe flames that incinerate the very air. The intense heat presses down in layers, turning the soil black and cracked while the air itself twists and warps. It is, quite frankly, a bit of an overreaction. The outer sect disciples watching from a distance turn pale with fright. They realize Elder Zhao has brought out a peak-level array usually reserved for defending the sect. They wonder if it's truly necessary to burn an outer disciple and the very earth itself into glass. But Ling Fan has no time to worry about their opinions. The moment the sea of fire rises, he turns around and uses his own back to shield the 3 spots where his seeds are buried. The heat is simply becoming too much. If those seeds are roasted, it's all over. As the fire dragons draw closer, the heat becomes so intense that Ling Fan's hair begins to singe and curl. He endures it as long as he can, but the veins on his forehead begin to throb. He wonders if these people will ever stop, first destroying his shack, then trampling his seeds. And now, they want to burn the very earth itself. Finally, at the exact moment the 9 fire dragons pounce, Ling Fan raises his head. His gaze has turned utterly cold. Deciding it's far too noisy, he stops shielding the soil and stands tall, his feet planted firmly as he slowly raises his hands. He brings his palms together in a motion so ordinary, it looks like he's simply about to clap. Meanwhile, in the great hall of the inner sect, Sect Master Chu Tianhua and the 12 Peak Masters are discussing the hidden ancestor. Suddenly, every single one of them turns pale. It's as if an invisible hand has gripped their hearts. An indescribable aura of pure destruction is radiating wildly from the direction of the outer sect's ancestral land. It isn't spiritual energy, nor is it a law or any divine ability they recognize. It is something far more primal, a force so pure it could crush all of existence into nothingness. Chu Tianhua's scalp tingles with pure dread as he realizes that fool Zhao Wuji has done something catastrophic, but he is already too late. Before the fire dragons can even reach Ling Fan, they are snuffed out like candles in a hurricane, unable to let out even a single whimper. A white shockwave slams into the 9-dragon flame array. We hear the sharp, rhythmic cracking of the light barrier as it shatters like fragile glass. The sinister grin hasn't even left Zhao Wuji's face yet, but the terrifying force of collapse is already surging back through the formation. He gasps that this is impossible just as the formation plate explodes in midair. To be honest, he really should have seen this coming. Zhao Wuji coughs up a mouthful of blood as his protective gear is pulverized. His internal energy turns to chaos, his meridians shredding as he is tossed aside. He falls from the sky like a broken kite, slamming into the ground and leaving a massive crater. As the dust settles, he lies half buried in the dirt. His spiritual power is fading, but the look in his eyes is worse than the injury. It is the hollow gaze of a man whose very path to immortality has been shattered. He mutters that a mortal cannot possibly possess such power without spiritual energy. He has, quite simply, lost his mind. At that moment, Chu Tianhua and the Peak Masters arrive. They arrive just in time to see Ling Fan finish his clap and look down with a hint of annoyance, rubbing his slightly reddened palms. Ling Fan glances at his surroundings, which have been leveled by the shockwave. It's a bit of a mess, really. While the others are baffled, Chu Tianhua sees the truth clearly. That wasn't a simple clap. It was the use of a primordial Tao to warp space itself. That simple gesture created a field of pure law-breaking force. A gentle breeze could extinguish a great array, and a clap could shatter a golden core elder. If this man isn't the ancestor, then who is? More importantly, that fool Zhao Wuji has actually managed to push this powerful being to his limit. Chu Tianque doesn't even dare to stay in the air. He stabilizes himself and drops straight from the sky, landing right in front of Ling Fan. His knees hit the ground so hard they leave 2 deep pits. Pressing his forehead into the dirt, his voice trembles as he begs for forgiveness. He pleads that he failed to discipline his subordinate and disturb the senior's cultivation. As he kneels, the 12 peak masters behind him follow suit. They all bow, begging the ancestor to calm his rage. We see the outer sect disciples watching from afar, completely stunned by the sight. The high and mighty sect master and peak masters are all kneeling before a simple farmer. Meanwhile, Ling Fan is a bit overwhelmed himself. He looks at the crowd on the ground, then at his reddened palms, and finally mutters that he only fanned the air because it was too hot. He asks if he'll have to pay for the damage, a question that nearly makes Chu Tianque's head hit the ground with enough force to spark. The sect master insists that Zhao Wuji was blind and deserved his fate. Fearing Ling Fan is still upset, he quickly offers his greatest sincerity. He invites the senior to stay in the inner sect's heavenly mirror, the most prestigious location in the Qingyun sect, to experience the mortal world. It boasts top-tier spiritual fields, purple gold soil, and ancient springs. Best of all, it includes free room and board with no interruptions. Ling Fan was ready to refuse, but the words top-tier fields and free food catch his attention. To be honest, he has his priorities straight. His eyes light up instantly. Good land means a good harvest, and a good harvest means plenty to eat. He immediately flashes a simple, honest smile. He pats Chu Tianque on the shoulder, telling him he should have said so sooner. And so, the two of them set off together. Under the dreamlike gaze of the entire sect, he shoulders his broken hoe and follows the bowing sect master toward the inner sect. From this day on, the fate of the Qingyun sect changes forever. They reach the heavenly mirror, a paradise suspended above a sea of clouds. Ling Fan is stunned as he steps inside. The soil beneath his feet is a delicate, soft purple gold, and the spiritual energy is thick enough to glow. A clear spring flows nearby, its purity almost frightening. To a cultivator, this is a holy land. To Ling Fan, it is a farming paradise. Without a second thought, he squats down to grab a handful of soil. He smells it carefully and rubs it between his fingers, completely at home. For the first time since arriving in this world, a truly sincere smile of satisfaction spreads across his face. It's good, truly good. The soil is loose and rich with organic matter. Even the mineral ratio is perfect. Now this is what he calls high-quality earth. Standing nearby, Chu Tianque listens with a tingling scalp, wondering what on earth mineral ratio could mean. He assumes these must be ancient words of power, the clarity of heaven, the spirit of earth, and the resonance of man. The more he ponders it, the more shocked he becomes. He quickly pulls out a jade slip and solemnly carves those 3 words into it, planning to meditate on their meaning with the 12 peak masters later. Ling Fan just glances at him. Deep down, he has only one thought. The man is clearly having another episode. He decides to ignore it and turns his attention to the ancient spring, taking a quick taste. The more he tastes, the more satisfied he is. The water quality is excellent and full of trace elements, making it perfect for irrigation. Seeing his good mood, Chu Tianque acts quickly. He presents a storage bag filled with the sect's most precious treasures, top-tier spirit herbs, divine bones, and 10,000-year-old snow jade ginseng. There is 9-leaf immortal grass, dragon blood fruit, and mysterious spirit rasher, items that would cause a bloodbath in the outside world. But as Ling Fan looks them over, his eyes shine even brighter than before. To him, these aren't treasures, they are simply high-quality organic fertilizer. He picks up the ancient snow jade ginseng, weighs it in his hand, and notes that its water content is high enough to be fermented into excellent liquid fertilizer. The 9-leaf grass, he decides, is also full of nutrients. The more he looks, the more pleased he becomes, looking as though he might start tilling the land right then and there. Chu Tianque is terrified by the suggestion, yet he can only agree. He nods with a forced smile, praising the senior's wisdom before tactfully making his exit. He immediately issues an order to seal off the entire area as a restricted zone. He stations the strongest elders nearby, ensuring that not even a fly can enter to disturb the senior. Ling Fan, meanwhile, doesn't stand on ceremony at all. He dumps out all those so-called sect treasures and uses his broken hoe to chop them into tiny pieces, mixing them with the purple gold soil and spring water. He builds a compost pile that radiates medicinal fragrance and divine light. After a few days of fermenting, it should be ready, and then he begins to loosen the soil. The land is good, but because it has been maintained by spirit arrays for so long, it has become a bit compacted. As he brings his hoe down, the entire heavenly mirror trembles. The shockwave is so immense that the blazing sun peak master, who is in the middle of a breakthrough, has his spiritual energy scattered instantly by the vibration. The poor master coughs up a mouthful of blood as the second strike of the hoe hits the ground. he retreats in silence, nursing his anger but not daring to speak a word. At that same moment, the stone doors of the Holy Sun's palace explode outward after 3 years of seclusion. A pillar of sword intent pierces the clouds, causing every flying sword in the inner sect to hum in resonance. A young man in snow-white robes steps out, his aura as deep as an abyss. He has reached the peak of the Golden Core stage. This is Chu Tianjiao, the sect master's son and the undisputed top genius of the Qingyan sect. But the moment he emerges, he learns that his reserved heavenly mirror has been occupied by someone else, and that someone is a mere mortal. Tianjiao laughs right then and there. His laughter is as cold as a blade. Clearly, someone has grown tired of living. He quickly storms into the main hall, where at that very moment, Chu Tianhua and the 12 peak masters are gathered around a jade slip, debating the meaning of Ling Fan's words until they are red in the face. "Father," Tianjiao says from the doorway, his voice heavy and cold, "why did you give the heavenly mirror to a mortal?" Tianhua's expression changes instantly as he shouts for him to stop. That senior has a special status. Do not ask about him, and certainly do not provoke him. But the more he says this, the more absurd it sounds to Tianjiao. A mortal? Why call him a senior, and why let him live in his place? He refuses to listen, turning to leave while dropping a single, chilling sentence. At this very moment, he raises his head, and from a distance of 1,000 meters, his gaze pierces through the air like a sword, locking onto a certain person on the main platform. Does a mortal without a shred of spiritual energy deserve to sit there? Take one of my arrows. The entire field falls silent. Tianhua's face pales, and he nearly leaps from his seat in a panic. But just then, the great elder reaches out to stop him, smiling slowly. "Sectmaster, why be so nervous? If he is a senior, isn't it only right that he gives a junior some guidance?" Tianhua's hands shake with rage. These fools are clearly gambling with their lives just to test the waters. But Ling Fan has no idea what they're thinking. He's just cracking melon seeds, frowning slightly. Because today's seeds are a bit too salty, he makes a mental note to tell them to use less salt next time. To Tianjiao, this blatant disregard is nothing short of a public humiliation. He can no longer contain himself, transforming into a streak of light and landing directly on the main platform, sword drawn. A blast of sword energy whistles past Ling Fan's ear, slicing the cold jade throne behind him clean in two. "I am speaking to you," Tianjiao says, standing tall. His white robes flutter, and his eyes are as cold as if he were looking at a dead man. Ling Fan finally stops cracking seeds, not out of fear, but because of the noise. This kid is simply too loud. Seeing him look up, a cold smirk curls on Tianjiao's lips. In the next heartbeat, the aura of a peak golden core is fully unleashed, and a trace of sword Dao laws begins to permeate the air. "To fall before my phantom sword Dao is your honor," he declares. As soon as the words leave his lips, his figure suddenly blurs. 1, 10, 100, 1,000. In an instant, countless sword shadows fill the entire main platform. Each one is sharp enough to slice the soul, weaving together to block every possible escape. The disciples below are terrified, and even the elders and peak masters change color. The power of laws. The Holy Sun has actually touched the threshold of the sword Dao. Laws. Ling Fan looks up and truly cannot help but let out a sigh. Communication is clearly impossible. Standing atop the 10,000 swords, Tianjiao's voice is freezing. "Bow your head and admit defeat now. Then get out of the heavenly mirror, and I might spare your dignity." Ling Fan, however, is too lazy to waste words. He simply picks up a single, slightly damp melon seed shell from the plate, holding it lightly between his thumb and middle finger. It is a casual, almost careless movement, but the moment he flicks that flimsy shell, the very space within an inch of his fingers collapses slightly. Then, it simply vanishes, leaving behind only a streak of light so fast that no one's divine sense can even track it. It tears through the air instantly, piercing straight through the sky full of sword shadows. Those shadows, which were so imposing just a moment ago, disintegrate along that path of light without even a sound of collision, as if erased from existence by a higher level of reality. The arrogance on Tianjiao's face is still there, yet he already feels a sense of extreme crisis. But he has no time to hide, let alone react. With a very soft thud, his body is sent flying backward 10 times faster than when he charged onto the platform. He flies across the entire martial arts field until he is pinned firmly against the iron cliff wall in the distance. His white robes are shredded, his long hair disheveled, and his limbs hang limply. He looks like a crookedly nailed painting, swaying slightly with the mountain wind. The entire field falls into a deathly silence as everyone freezes. They look at the white speck on the cliff, then back at the man still sitting calmly on the platform, feeling their minds go completely blank. The great elder is the first to rush over, both shocked and enraged. He howls as he reaches the cliff, extending his hand to pull Tianjiao down. But the moment his fingers touch that hidden weapon, his entire body suddenly stiffens, because the thing pinning Tianjiao to the iron cliff isn't a magic treasure or a flying sword at all, but it is a single, charred black melon seed shell. As the great elder stares at it, the fury on his face slowly crumbles, leaving behind Nothing but bone-chilling terror and confusion. His very Dao heart begins to crack. Meanwhile, Chu Tianqua can barely contain his joy. Yes, this is it. Using a mere seed shell to shatter a holy sun's sword path and pin him to a cliff. This is exactly the kind of power an ancestor should possess. He gambled correctly, and the Qingyun sect gambled correctly. But Ling Fan doesn't seem to think this is worth getting excited about at all. He simply brushes the dust from his hands, stands up, and looks at the massive crowd below with a face full of pure disdain. He tells them not to call him for such acrobatics again because it's far too noisy. Shouldering his broken hoe, he turns to leave. He still has crops to water. But just then, his footsteps suddenly falter. It isn't just him. Everyone in the Qingyun sect simultaneously feels a piercing, ominous chill. We see the crowd look up as the once clear sky is swallowed by an endless expanse of blood-red clouds. It happens so fast, really. The clouds roll like a sea of blood, releasing a nauseating, murderous aura mixed with heavenly resentment that instantly blankets the mountain gates. Ear-piercing, eerie laughter echoes from deep within the crimson mist. A moment later, the clouds part to reveal 10, then dozens, then hundreds of ships. Hundreds of warships constructed from massive, bleached white bones emerge, trailing infinite dark energy as they sail out from the blood clouds. They blot out the sun, pressing down on the very heavens. Then, a voice filled with killing intent pierces the air like a demonic eagle. It tells the people of Qingyun sect to prepare for death by the order of their sect master. Today is the day their lineage ends. The Blood Demon sect has arrived in force. As the clouds descend, it becomes clear these people aren't just here for a casual visit. The bone warships continue to poke their heads through the rolling mist, their prows decorated with giant, hollow demonic hand statues. Ghostly flames flicker within them, looking like a pack of starving wolves eyeing a sheepfold. Without a single word of further waste, the flagship fires. A blood-colored pillar of light, as thick as a mountain, slams violently toward the Qingyun sect's main gate. Sect Master Chu Tianqua's eyes nearly burst as he roars, forcing the mountain protection array to activate. A green light barrier surges upward, barely managing to shield the sect within. Yet, even so, the moment that strike connects, the entire mountain feels as if it's been struck by a god. The ground shakes violently, and countless outer disciples are instantly sent reeling, coughing up blood. And to be honest, things are about to get much worse. The light barrier is forced down several feet as cold, mocking laughter echoes from the blood clouds. The Blood Demon sect has finally shown its hand. It turns out the Qingyun sect's mountain array was infiltrated 3,000 years ago, with blood sand secretly planted in its core. This war of extermination is something they have prepared for over a very long time. Before the words even fade, hundreds of ancient ships fire simultaneously, raining down pillars of light. Like a meteor shower at the end of the world, the strikes cause cracks to spread across the green barrier. The entire sect falls into absolute chaos as disciples panic. They flee in every direction, only to find that the ancient ships have completely sealed off the sky and every possible exit. Some cry out, some fall into total despair, and others are simply paralyzed by fear. The Great Elder stumbles toward Chu Tianqua, his face deathly pale and his voice trembling as he begs the sect master to surrender, fearing the entire sect will be buried here. But at this moment, Chu Tianqua's eyes have turned a fierce, bloodshot red. Shut up, he roars, shoving the Great Elder aside. He declares that Qingyun only has sect masters who die in battle, never those who surrender. He looks toward Tianyi Peak, his only hope for survival, and orders everyone to hold their positions while he goes to invite the ancestor to descend the mountain. Chu Tianqua moves with desperate speed, practically crashing through the bloody artillery fire to reach the entrance of the Tianyi spirit realm, only to be stunned. Blocking the cave entrance are 3 massive boulders, stacked as neatly as small mountains. Most frustratingly, the stones have words carved into them. In a messy, crooked scrawl, anti-theft. Chu Tianqua stares at those 2 words and falls into a brief, stunned silence before gritting his teeth and striking one of the boulders. He unleashes his nascent soul cultivation without holding back, yet the rock doesn't even quiver. Instead, the recoil sends his own blood surging. He nearly coughs up blood on the spot. It is then he realizes with horror that this isn't a seal or a complex formation at all. These are just 3 perfectly ordinary rocks, yet each one is impossibly heavy. Heavy in a way that completely defies the understanding of a nascent soul cultivator. His mind goes blank as the truth hits him. This isn't some grand restriction set by the senior. These are just 3 rocks he casually moved to block the door. Meanwhile, Ling Fan remains blissfully unaware of the chaos outside. He is humming a little tune, carrying a large wooden bucket in each hand to fetch water. As the mountains shake and the sky rumbles with explosions, he looks up at the dark clouds and assumes a heavy thunderstorm is coming. This weather, he thinks, really does change in an instant. He fills his buckets and heads toward his fields. Lately, his proudest achievement isn't some sect title or some top-tier spiritual path, but the irrigation canal he spent 3 whole days digging, one swing of the hoe at a time. It's all about the simple things. The depth is perfectly consistent, and looking at it brings a sense of deep satisfaction. It is practically his masterpiece. He had even planned to lead the water into it today so that by tomorrow, that half seed could finally be planted. But no one could have predicted that as he bent down to pour the spring water, an ear-piercing whistle would suddenly scream from above. He looks up instinctively, only to see a massive, blood-red sphere of light plummeting straight toward Tiani Peak. An earth-shattering explosion erupts right beside his ears, and the violent shockwave sends him stumbling back. The two wooden buckets fly from his hands, spilling the spring water everywhere. He steadies himself, but when he looks down, he freezes completely, right in the center of that perfect irrigation canal, the one he spent 3 whole days digging to save his seed. There is now a 3-meter-wide crater smoldering with black smoke. The canal is severed, the water is gone, and the fresh spring water he just fetched is pointlessly seeping into the dirt, vanishing in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the sounds of artillery, the screams of battle, and the crumbling of the mountain array all seem to drift far away from him. He simply stands there, staring at the hole, as the smile on his face slowly fades away. After a long silence, he slowly raises his head. His gaze travels across the entirety of Tiani Peak and through the mountain barrier, locking precisely onto the ship in the sky, whose cannons are still smoking. I spent 3 whole days digging that, he says, his voice so soft it is almost a whisper to himself. You bastards, flying around up there, you have truly annoyed me. Having said this, he doesn't reach for his hoe or pick up his buckets. Instead, he turns and walks toward the back of the fields. There stands the divine mountain stone, a relic present since the founding of the Chinyan sect. Legend says that even 100,000 nascent soul cultivators working together couldn't move it an inch. Meanwhile, inside the Blood Demon sect's flagship, there is a celebration. The demon cultivator who missed his target is still claiming credit, and the one-eyed commander assumes that shot simply hit a vital ley line node. He is absolutely thrilled, immediately ordering all ships to recharge their spiritual cannons for a full, indiscriminate bombardment of the back mountain. To them, the Qingyun sect is already meat on the chopping block. Yet, in the very next moment, chaos erupts on the ground first. The first to notice something is wrong are a few inner disciples. They happen to look back and see that the divine mountain stone behind Tiani Peak is actually rising off the ground, inch by inch. There is no mystical light, no spiritual energy, and no grand technique. It is simply being lifted by sheer force. Beneath the massive boulder, we see Ling Fan, his arms wrapped around the stone and his legs sinking into the mud. The ground around him is cracking under the pressure as he prepares to throw the entire mountain. He hoisted the mountain-like divine stone onto his shoulders, a sight so impossible that everyone watching felt their minds go blank. Even Chu Tianque stood frozen in shock until this very moment, when he finally understood why he couldn't even budge those 3 anti-theft stones earlier. To his daughter, those really were just small pebbles. Up in the sky, the Blood Demon sect members noticed him too. They paused for a brief second before bursting into a collective, mocking roar of laughter. What is that little insect doing down there? Does he think throwing a rock will hit us? It was pathetic and laughable, a desperate final act before death. The one-eyed commander's cruel smirk had only just begun to form when Ling Fan moved. He lowered his center of gravity, his waist and back tensing as his entire strength instantly condensed into a single point. He took a throwing stance so perfect it was textbook, and in the next second, he exploded with power. Boom. The ground for 10 meters around him collapsed half a foot deep. The divine mountain stone, weighing over 50 tons, vanished the instant it left his hand. A streak of fire tore through the sky, trailing a long tail of flame as it surged upward like a meteorite being forcibly hurled back into the heavens. It was simply too fast, so fast that the alarms on the Blood Demon flagship had only just started to wail. The pilot didn't even have time to react, and the defensive arrays had no chance to activate before the commander's expression shattered. There were no fancy magical techniques or mystical sounds. It was just a pure, brutal impact. And yet, precisely because it was so pure and concentrated, the massive flagship disintegrated on the spot. Countless demon cultivators didn't even have time to process what was happening before they fell from the sky along with the wreckage. They dropped from 10,000 meters like stones, crashing heavily inside and outside the Qinyan sect gates until all was silent. A massive hole had been violently carved out of the sky. Back on Tiani Peak, Ling Fan expressionlessly withdrew his hand and even brushed the dust off his palms. It was as if he had just tossed aside a piece of bothersome scrap wood. He looked up at the remaining 99 ancient ships, his voice terrifyingly calm. "One ship isn't enough to pay for my water," he muttered. "Since you're all here, don't bother leaving." What happened next is something the Qinyan sect will likely never forget for the rest of their lives. Ling Fan walked over, picked out an even larger, more comfortable stone, and gave it a test toss. Then came the third, the fourth, and the fifth. Single-handedly, he began an anti-aircraft battle the cultivation world had never seen before. Whether they weighed dozens of tons or hundreds, if a rock caught his eye, he forcibly ripped it from the mountain's ley line and used it as ammunition. Boom, boom, boom. One by one, the burning boulders trailed long tails of flame, looking like a reverse shower of meteors screaming toward the fleet. The stones rained upward from the ground like a reverse meteor shower, screaming toward the sky. There were no magical duels or clashing grand dows, only the most extreme, pure weight, and unbelievable speed. As it turns out, when those two things are sufficiently ridiculous, spiritual shields, defensive treasures, and armored hulls all become as useless as wet paper. We see ancient ships blasted midair, exploding into a sky full of fireworks. Two other ships tried to bank left and right to evade, only to be skewered together by a massive rock like a giant candied hawthorn stick before disintegrating. Several nascent soul cultivators had just rushed out of their cabins, but before they could even finish their hand seals, the sheer airflow from a passing stone fragment shattered their physical bodies into nothingness. The Blood Demon sect went from arrogance to horror, and then to a total collapse, a breakdown that happened even faster than their ships falling apart. They screamed to run, realizing this wasn't a war, but a massacre. He wasn't a man, he was a devil. Unfortunately for them, it was already far too late to flee. Ling Fan was getting into a rhythm now. As the back mountains of the Qingyun sect were leveled flatter and flatter, the ancient ships in the sky grew fewer and fewer. Chu Tianque watched this scene with tears of excitement streaming down his face, muttering about the simplicity of the great Tao and returning to one's true self. To him, this was the ultimate immortal technique, until Ling Fan casually picked up a very familiar-looking giant rock. Chu Tianque froze, realizing that was actually his own private meditation chamber. Before he could finish his sentence, his room was already trailing a tail of fire into the sky, accurately smashing through 3 fleeing ships at once. Chu Tianque's body trembled, but his expression immediately shifted into one of even more fanatical, reverent awe. He shouted that it was a masterpiece, claiming it was his chamber's greatest honor to serve as the senior's ammunition. Within a short time, the Blood Demon sect's fleet of over 100 sunblotting ships had been reduced to just 3 battered wrecks struggling to stay afloat. Ling Fan tossed aside the last convenient stone, preparing to finish them off when the world suddenly went dark. It wasn't a cloudy day, nor was it a storm. It was a thick, blood-like gloom that covered the entire world without warning. Immediately after, a terrifying pressure far beyond the nascent soul realm thundered down from the high heavens. The massive stones still flying through the air were eerily frozen in an instant, as if time itself had stopped, before silently crumbling into fine powder. Cold raindrops began to fall as an old, raspy voice, filled with endless fury, exploded in everyone's soul. The voice demanded to know who dared destroy the foundation of the Blood Demon sect. In the next moment, the very fabric of the world began to twist. The mountain gates, the rocks, the ship wreckage, the sky, and the earth. Everything felt as if it were being crushed by an invisible, giant hand. The world seemed to shatter and reassemble. When everyone finally regained their senses, they found themselves no longer standing on bluestone ground, but atop a churning sea of withered bones and wreckage. Above them, the sky had vanished, replaced by a massive, swirling crimson vortex. For 100 miles, the entire Qingyun sect had been forcibly dragged into another dimension, a soul transformation domain. Above this sea of blood, a withered old man in blood-red robes, looking like dried wood, slowly emerged. His hair danced wildly, and his eyes looked as if 2 rivers of blood were surging within them. This was the Blood Demon sect's ancestor, who had been in seclusion for 1,000 years. Rumored to have passed away long ago, the soul transformation ancestor, Shuehe, had returned. The moment he appeared, Chu Tianque and the others fell into utter despair. The reason was simple. The sect master, the elders, and every disciple, inner and outer alike, were pinned down in this blood river realm, unable to move a single muscle. Protective spiritual lights were eroded by the blood water as people sank helplessly into the sea. Some couldn't even manifest their spiritual power, forced to watch as they and their fellow disciples were slowly swallowed whole. The great elder collapsed into the bloody water, his face ashen as he muttered that it was all over. In a soul transformation domain, they wouldn't even have a chance at reincarnation. Ancestor Shui, he looked down upon this desperate scene, finally letting his gaze fall upon Ling Fan, as if he were looking at a slightly stronger than average ant. He asked if this was the mortal who threw the stones. He admitted the boy's physical body was interesting, but noted that in his blood river realm, the law was supreme. Here, only his will mattered. He claimed Ling Fan's brute strength couldn't move so much as a grain of dust. He spoke slowly and with immense pride, clearly savoring this feeling of high and mighty judgment. However, Ling Fan wasn't actually listening. To be honest, he hadn't looked at the old man once. He was looking down, his entire attention focused on his own feet. Those multi-layered cloth shoes he had just bought that morning were now completely soaked through with the foul, viscous blood water. The surface of the shoes was filthy, and the sticky sensation beneath his soles made him extremely uncomfortable. He didn't care about the old man's grand declarations. Soul transformation or not, Ling Fan simply raised his right leg. There was still no spiritual power, no mystical light, and not even a proper combat stance. But as that leg was lifted, the surrounding space began to twist slightly, as if it couldn't withstand some impossible weight. His coarse cloth pant leg suddenly burst apart, revealing leg muscles that looked as if they had been forged inch by inch from dark iron. In the next second, he slammed his foot down toward the churning sea of blood. This kick didn't sound like a foot hitting the ground. It sounded like the entire world had been struck by a giant sledgehammer. A massive, white shockwave exploded along the surface of the blood sea. Everywhere it passed, that boundless sea that could suppress nascent souls didn't last even a second. The sea of blood couldn't withstand the impact for even a second, instantly evaporating into nothingness under the sheer heat and shockwave of his stomp. Immediately after, the entire Blood River realm began to flicker, warp, and crack like a glass mirror struck dead center by a massive sledgehammer. As the cracks spread with a deafening shatter, the arrogance on Ancestor Shue's face froze completely. A moment later, his very reality collapsed. The backlash of the broken laws hit him instantly, leaving his aura withered and his body suffering from irreversible, catastrophic damage. The world blurred for everyone present, and when we regain our senses, we find ourselves back on the martial grounds of the Qingyun sect. The clear sky and the mountain gates have returned, making that sea of blood feel like a nightmare, except for the fading, ghostly figure of Shui. He stares at Ling Fan with nothing but infinite terror in his eyes, unable to comprehend how mere physical strength could shatter space itself. Before he can even finish his sentence about his soul being immortal, the lingering shockwaves cause him to vanish into a cloud of dust. His body and soul are utterly extinguished, leaving behind only a single, shimmering storage ring that falls from the sky with a soft metallic clink. That ring contains the entire fortune of a soul transformation ancestor, and every survivor of the Qingyun sect stares at it, their breathing growing heavy. We see Ling Fan walk toward it, and everyone's heart leaps into their throat, assuming he has finally taken an interest in such a divine treasure. To be honest, they couldn't have been more wrong. He reaches the ring and, without even a glance, kicks it away like an annoying pebble. After sending the fortune flying into some forgotten corner, he steps over the debris and reaches into the rubble to retrieve something else. It is his wooden bucket, now deformed by the battle and riddled with holes. He holds the broken thing, sighing with genuine heartache over the cracks. Now he'll have to go back to town to buy a new one. As the battle ends, a terrifying silence falls over the entire Qingyun sect. The silence lasts only a moment before Chu Tianque rushes forward like a bolt of lightning, throwing himself at Ling Fan's feet and grabbing his leg. He begins to babble incoherently, calling Ling Fan Grandmaster and Supreme Ancestor, while begging for the honor of bowing before him. With the sect master leading the way, tens of thousands of disciples fall to their knees in a massive wave, their voices nearly shaking the mountains. They beg for the ancestors' forgiveness, and the sheer noise gives Ling Fan a headache. He looks down at Chu Tianque, who refuses to let go. Ling Fan frowns and tries to shake his leg free, but Chu Tianque only hugs it tighter, declaring that the ancestor is the very sky above their sect. As Chu Tianque continues his speech about the path of cultivation, Ling Fan, tired of listening, looks up at the massive crowd and calmly drops a single warning. If anyone dares to disturb the peace of Tianyi Peak again, he promises to throw stones at them. The entire field falls into a deathly silence instantly. In that second, everyone vividly remembers the meteor shower of stones he threw from the ground to the sky. Chu Tianque lets go as if struck by lightning. He scrambles back 3 steps and kneels properly, shouting that he will obey the ancestors' decree. From that day on, Tianyi Peak becomes the sect's most sacred ground. It also becomes the most terrifying place in the Qingyun sect. Not just disciples and elders, but even birds prefer to fly a long way around it. A new habit even forms within the sect, bowing toward Tianyi Peak before starting cultivation. As for Ling Fan, he has no time for such things. He is busy repairing his water bucket, tidying his field, and wondering how to keep that half-seed alive. Half a month later, the sect finally catches its breath. Suddenly, a golden decree from the Middle Continent descends upon the Great Hall. It announces one of the highest opportunities in the Tianlan realm, the ancient immortal realm. The news of the secret realm's opening initially excites the sect's high-ranking officials, but their spirits quickly deflate. To be honest, they were being a bit optimistic. The Qingyun sect is severely weakened. How can they compete with the Holy Lands and ancient families of the Middle Continent? Those people are fighting for immortality. They fear they won't even get a glimpse of the treasures, until Chu Tianque slaps his thigh, his eyes shining. "We have our ancestor," he reminds them. That single sentence wakes everyone up. Indeed, they have Ling Fan. What do holy sons, saintesses, or hidden geniuses matter compared to him? In front of their ancestor, wouldn't those great figures end up just like the ancestor of the Blood River? Chu Tianque immediately bathes, dresses, and runs to the peak. He stands outside Tianyi Peak, his voice echoing with desperate hope. He shouts that the opening of the ancient immortal realm is vital to the sect's 10,000-year plan, begging the ancestor to lead them and suppress all rivals. This time, the door finally opens. Ling Fan walks out with a yawn, looks at him, and gives a very direct answer. He simply says he isn't going. Chu Tianque is stunned, reminding him that it's the legacy of an immortal. Ling Fan asks if that legacy can be eaten for dinner. He picks at his ear, explaining that his spirit field is about to sprout and needs constant care. Chu Tianqua is so anxious his mouth is practically on fire. He rambles about ascending to heaven, living as long as the world, and obtaining peerless treasures and divine techniques, every benefit he can possibly imagine. But Ling Fan still has only one thing to say. He's not interested. As he turns to go back inside, Chu Tianqua has a sudden stroke of genius and shouts about fertilizer. He claims the secret realm contains the world's highest grade fertilizer. Ling Fan's hand stops mid-air as he's closing the door, and he slowly turns his head back. Seeing a glimmer of hope, Chu Tianqua quickly spills the secret he's been keeping. He explains that ancient texts mention a patch of 10,000-year soil at the realm's core. This Shirong spirit soil is said to be a strand of primordial earth from the dawn of creation. It contains endless vitality and is, quite literally, the ultimate divine soil. The moment the words top-tier fertilizer leave his mouth, the world blurs. A second later, Chu Tianqua finds himself being hoisted into the air by his collar. Ling Fan's eyes are glowing now, his breathing a bit heavy as he stares him down. He needs to confirm this. 10,000-year fertilizer? Can it really make his crops thrive? Chu Tianqua, whose eyes are nearly rolling back from being choked, nods frantically. He gasps that it's certain it could produce a harvest beyond his wildest dreams. Upon hearing this, Ling Fan drops him immediately and rushes back into his house. After a frantic sound of rummaging through chests and cupboards, he emerges once more with 3 massive snakeskin sacks slung over his shoulder. The sacks are printed with 3 very simple, unpretentious words: Bumper Harvest Brand. In his other hand, he carries his hoe, polished until it shines like a mirror. He looks at the still-dazed Chu Tianqua sitting on the ground and gives the order. He declares it's time to move. Half an hour later, the teleportation array at the Qingyun sect's gate lights up. There aren't many people in this group. There are only 3, Sect Master Chu Tianqua, looking solemn, and Chu Tianjiao. The young man has long since lost that arrogant air of wanting to challenge everything. After being humbled by a sunflower seed and witnessing Ling Fan shatter a spirit transformation domain with a rock, his perspective has shifted quite a bit. The way he looks at Ling Fan now has changed from defiance to a sort of fanatical, wide-eyed worship. Meanwhile, Ling Fan stands at the front of the group. He has 1 sack on his shoulder, 2 more tucked into his belt, and a gleaming hoe in his hand. With his worn-out straw sandals, he looks unique. To be honest, he doesn't look like he's going to fight for an immortal legacy. He looks like a farmer heading to a market to pick up some supplies. He even seems a bit impatient, grumbling for them to hurry up. If they're late, he worries someone else might snatch all the good fertilizer. Then, with a flash, they vanish. The next moment, at the immortal Fallen Valley in the Middle Continent, space twists and spiritual light scatters. They are met with an aura of spiritual energy so thick it's almost solid. There is also a sense of high-class grandeur that is the exact opposite of Ling Fan's current aesthetic. All around the valley, treasures glow and sharp energies surge toward the sky. In the air, we see holy sons in golden chariots pulled by 9 dragons, and saintesses in snow-white robes standing atop rainbow-colored flying swords. There are even heirs of ancient families riding in floating jade pavilions, surrounded by exotic beasts. Each one of them radiates an intimidating, divine pressure. Naturally, they're the kind of people who expect to be the center of attention. Their gazes quickly sweep over the crowd, first passing dismissively over Chu Tianqua and Chu Tianjiao, who clearly aren't worth their notice. But then, those eyes finally land on Ling Fan, the man carrying snakeskin sacks and holding a hoe, wearing worn-out straw sandals and looking around like an old farmer visiting the city for the first time. In that moment, countless gazes of mockery, hostility, and utter confusion focused directly on him. After a brief, stunned silence, the entire immortal Fallen Valley practically explodes with laughter. First, Long Out Yin, the holy son of the divine firmament, descends in a golden chariot pulled by 9 black dragons. Then, the saintess of Yaoqi arrives, riding within a floating white jade pavilion. Following them, the disciples of the Mount Shu sword sect appear, treading on ancient blades with soaring sword intent. As each holy son and saintess makes their entrance, they are surrounded by divine light and breathtaking visions, each trying to outdo the other's grand display. And yet, here is Ling Fan, standing there with his Bumper Harvest brand snakeskin sack, clutching his farm hoe. The crowd begins to jeer, asking if the Qingyun sect has run out of people. Why would they bring a dirt-covered peasant? Is that sack for snacks? They laugh, suggesting that perhaps he really is just here to loosen the soil. Chu Tianqua's face turns bright red with shame, yet he doesn't dare to lash out. Chu Tianjiao, however, can't take it. He draws his sword on the spot, his sharp sword intent erupting as he points it at the ones laughing the loudest. Just as a conflict is about to break out, Ling Fan reaches out and gently presses a hand on the young man's shoulder. Why bother arguing with them? He yawns and pats the sack on his shoulder, speaking with the gravity of someone discussing a matter of state. He tells him to save his energy for digging up soil. Chu Tianjiao is stunned for a moment, but then, surprisingly, he actually sheathes his sword and retreats quietly behind Ling Fan. To Long Outyin, this looks pathetic. In his eyes, this is clearly a case of a coward holding back the only person in his sect brave enough to stand up. He assumes Ling Fan has chosen to submit. He lets out a disdainful snort, his eyes full of contempt. However, in the next heartbeat, he silently releases his spiritual pressure, a hidden, cruel test. It is the terrifying pressure of a peak golden core cultivator, far exceeding his peers, rolling toward Ling Fan like an invisible, crushing wave. He wants to force this peasant to his knees in front of everyone, to humiliate him completely. Chu Tianqua and Chu Tianjiao are the first to feel it, their faces turning pale. They feel as if a mountain is pressing down on them, forcing them to circulate their spiritual power just to stay upright. But Ling Fan, he doesn't react at all. The pressure, heavy enough to crush a mountain, falls squarely on Ling Fan. Yet, remarkably, it doesn't even ruffle his faded, coarse cotton shirt. In fact, he seems to find the breeze quite refreshing. He casually picks his nose before leaning over to tighten the straps on his straw sandals. He then begins looking around, appearing more interested in judging the soil quality than the divine pressure. Long Outyan's expression shifts instantly from arrogance to confusion. He intensifies the pressure until the very space around them ripples, yet Ling Fan remains unbothered. Naturally, Long Outyan's mind quickly jumps to a different conclusion. He decides that Ling Fan must be carrying a top-tier secret treasure that shields his cultivation, something at least at the level of a heaven-reaching spiritual tool. In an instant, his contempt transforms into pure greed. Why should a mere peasant possess such a treasure? The thought of murder and theft begins to take root. Just as that dark thought arises, the center of the immortal fallen valley erupts with a thunderous roar. The spatial rift of the immortal treasury tears open without warning. Seven-colored divine light pours out, accompanied by an ancient spiritual energy, so thick it feels tangible. The secret realm has finally opened its doors. At that moment, the crowd loses all composure. Holy sons, saintesses, and heirs of great families charge toward the rift like a pack of hungry wolves. They use every divine movement technique in their arsenal, desperate to be the first to enter the rift. Ling Fan begins to walk toward the opening as well, but just as he sets one foot inside, a terrifying dragon's roar echoes from the depths, shaking the very soul. In the next heartbeat, those geniuses who had rushed to the front are sent flying back like swatted flies, landing in a pathetic heap on the ground. Seeing this, Ling Fan calmly pulls his foot back. He takes a moment to pat the dust off his snakeskin sack before looking up at the entrance. A massive, menacing head of a flood dragon slowly emerges from the rift. It is a 100-jong-long primordial black flood dragon, ancient and terrifying. Its scales are pitch black and its aura is overwhelming, having clearly surpassed the nascent soul stage to reach the very brink of god transformation. The arrogant geniuses from moments ago now turn pale with fear. However, the temptation of the immortal's inheritance is simply too great to ignore. Long Outyan grits his teeth and steps forward, declaring that they must join forces to break through this first trial. He unleashes his divine dragon art with a shout. 9 dragon phantoms transform into pillars of purple gold light, slamming into the black flood dragon. Immediately, the Yaoqi light and Mount Shu sword arts follow suit. For a moment, the sky is filled with brilliant treasures and interwoven laws, creating a scene so dazzling it seems the heavens themselves might be overturned. And yet, the result is painfully awkward. After a chorus of metallic clangs, those divine abilities, meant to level mountains, leave the dragon completely unscathed. The attacks land on the dragon's scales, but we only see a few sparks fly. Not only is the defense unbroken, but there isn't even a white scratch left behind. It is essentially a divine massage. The black flood dragon is clearly annoyed now and slowly opens its massive maw. Long Outyan barely has time to scream a warning before a jet of pitch-black dragon breath erupts. The breath sweeps across the field with no explosion or flashy effects, only pure annihilation. 3 heirs of the sacred lands, unable to dodge in time, find themselves and their treasures instantly reduced to drifting ash. This single display of power strikes absolute terror into the crowd, and they scramble backward like the wind, with no one daring to take another step forward. Yet, in the midst of this dead silence and despair, Ling Fan shoulders his hoe and pushes through the crowd, casually walking to the very front. To be honest, he isn't even looking at the dragon. His gaze has already bypassed the beast and is fixed firmly on the ground behind it. At the center of the ancient formation, about 10 acres of 5-colored spiritual soil are glowing softly. The aura of life is so thick it practically overflows. This is the 10,000-year living soil, a treasure of the earth itself. The spiritual energy is palpable, and the silence is heavy. Long Outyan nearly laughs out loud at the sight. He thinks this peasant is actually trying to reason with a god transformation-level beast. But in the next heartbeat, the black flood dragon snaps. Enraged, the dragon lashes out with its tail, creating a sonic boom that tears through the air as it swings toward Ling Fan's head. This strike would crush a nascent soul cultivator, let alone a golden core. The force is so great that space itself seems to wrinkle. Chu Tianqua's heart sinks, and he nearly closes his eyes in horror. But Ling Fan doesn't even flinch. Just as the tail is about to strike, He impatiently raises his right hand and catches it. With a dull thud, the impact that should have ground a cultivator's body and soul into powder is stopped dead in its tracks. The massive tail sits firmly in his hand. All that kinetic energy and overwhelming momentum, upon making contact with his palm, simply vanishes like a clay ox entering the sea, disappearing completely. Every person in the crowd stands frozen, their mouths hanging open in utter disbelief. He actually caught it. The black flood dragon is stunned as well. It twists its body frantically, trying to pull its tail back, but Ling Fan's grip is absolute. It is as if the beast is being held down by an immemorial divine mountain, unable to move an inch. Getting a bit annoyed by the dragon's thrashing, Ling Fan tightens his grip, twists his waist, and lets out a shout. Get up! He heaves the massive creature into the air with terrifying ease. The follower who had laughed the loudest at him earlier feels his legs go weak and collapses onto the ground. But Ling Fan isn't finished. He spots the ancient formation protecting the soil. Without a second thought, he uses the Black Flood Dragon as a literal club and slams it against the barrier. Bang! On the first hit, the formation flickers wildly as the dragon screams in pain. Bang! On the second hit, the formation is covered in cracks and the dragon's scales begin to shatter. Bang! On the third hit, we hear a definitive crack as the barrier gives way. With a final, sharp crack, the ancient formation explodes on the spot. As for that poor Black Flood Dragon, the shock leaves it completely breathless and instantly unconscious. The silence that follows in the Valley of Fallen Immortals is deafening. The surviving prodigies stare at the comatose beast, and then they look at Ling Fan. He is simply squatting on the ground with a look of pure bliss, focused on his harvest. Their minds have completely stopped working. Long Outyen's face is deathly pale, and his entire body is trembling. He originally thought he was looking at a country bumpkin, but now he realizes he is looking at a monster. To be honest, the realization came a bit late. But just as Ling Fan is happily digging up the soil, the entire secret realm suddenly shifts again. A low rumble shakes the earth as the ground begins to crack violently. The 10,000-year living soil beneath his feet and the entire valley are quaking. Suddenly, a bottomless, pitch-black abyss tears open from the very heart of the earth. Blood-red lightning replaces the sky, and an ancient, evil aura, 1,000 times more terrifying than the dragon, erupts from the depths. In the next moment, a cold, arrogant laugh explodes directly within everyone's souls. 10,000 years. For 10,000 years, I have waited to see the sun again. What a mortal venerable's inheritance. It was nothing more than a bit of bait left by my subordinates, used to lure in the freshest blood of this era. Everyone's hearts sink to the bottom. It was a trap. This entire secret realm, from start to finish, was a lie. Soon, a terrifying phantom, 10,000 feet tall, rises slowly from the abyss. We can barely make out a face. He has only 2 eyes like black holes, and a single glance is enough to make even a nascent soul cultivator like Chu Tianqua feel as if his soul is shattering. A descendant of an ancient family recognizes him and collapses in terror. It is the heaven-swallowing evil immortal, or rather, the remnant soul of the one once suppressed here. The evil immortal seems to savor their fear. He raises a hand and, with a casual flick of his wrist, wipes the entrance of the secret realm out of existence. Everyone instinctively tries to crush their teleportation talismans, but there is no response. The exit is gone. The secret realm has been completely sealed shut. At this moment, the so-called saints and saintesses, who were acting so superior just moments ago, completely break down, which, naturally, is a rather pathetic sight. Long Outyen is the first to drop to his knees, kowtowing frantically. Lord Evil Immortal, I am the son of the divine firmament. My bloodline must be useful to you. Spare me. The Saintess of the Jade Pool also loses her composure, crying out that she is willing to be his slave or maid. As for the others, they fare even worse, trembling and showing their ugliest sides. They've truly disgraced the name of cultivators. The heaven-swallowing evil immortal watches them and smiles with satisfaction. The evil immortal laughs, and with a sudden, violent breath, he inhales. Several golden core cultivators kneeling on the outer circle don't even have time to react before their bodies wither instantly. Their essence, spirit, and souls are sucked away as streaks of blood-red light, swallowed directly into his mouth. On the ground, only a few desiccated husks remain. Despair spreads through the valley like a plague. Yet, in this hellish scene of wailing and ghosts, we see that Ling Fan's priorities are quite different from everyone else's. He simply doesn't have time to listen to the villain's nonsense. He even scrapes up a large clump of soil from the side to pack down his bag, terrified that a single grain of his precious fertilizer might blow away. Naturally, this scene catches the evil immortal's eye. While others are kneeling, crying, or being drained into human husks, here is a mortal with absolutely no spiritual fluctuations whatsoever, squatting there to protect a bag of dirt. The heaven-swallowing evil immortal is not amused. That a mere mortal dares to be so insolent in his presence is unthinkable. With a cold snort, he forms hand seals, unleashing a forbidden immortal technique that transcends the laws of this world, the great karma deprivation art. In the next heartbeat, countless invisible, Illusory threads of thought emerge from the void in all directions, instantly entangling Ling Fan's limbs. To be honest, it looks quite messy. These are karma lines, tethering his past, present, and future. In theory, once they tighten, his entire existence should be completely erased from the river of time. Chu Tianhua and Chu Tianjiao feel their hearts go cold at the sight. Long Outyen, however, clings to this as a final bit of comfort, his face twisting into a smile that looks worse than crying. A causal law attack. Surely, he thinks, the boy must die this time. But 1 second passes, 10 seconds pass, full minute passes, and Ling Fan is still standing right there. Forget being erased into nothingness. There isn't even an extra wrinkle on his clothes. The heaven-swallowing evil immortal is stunned. He can clearly feel that the karma lines have locked onto him, and the laws are activating at full power, yet he simply cannot pull the boy. It feels like trying to drag an entire universe using a single strand of spider silk. Eventually, even Ling Fan notices something is wrong. He looks down at these sticky things tightening around his arms and legs, feeling quite uncomfortable, and his brow furrows. To him, these aren't some profound laws of causality. They look more like some brat has covered him in spider webs, seriously interfering with his work. And so, under the gazes of everyone present, who are all on the verge of a mental breakdown, he reaches out with his large hands, calloused and with fresh soil still under the fingernails. He reaches for those karma lines, which should be formless and only perceptible to the soul, and he simply grabs them. With a sharp crack, those threads made of pure universal law are actually gripped firmly in his hands. The heaven-swallowing evil immortal lets out a piercing shriek of disbelief. It's impossible. Karma lines are the manifestation of law. How could a mortal's physical body ever touch them? The evil immortal shrieks, demanding to know what kind of monster Ling Fan is. But our protagonist ignores him, simply tugging on the threads to see if they're sturdy before looking up. With a look of pure annoyance, he asks what this junk is and why it's tangled around him, wondering if the villain is trying to knit him a sweater. This single remark leaves the entire valley in a stunned silence. The saintess of the Yaoqi sect actually faints on the spot from the shock, while Long Outyen's mind goes completely blank. He doesn't even notice the drool escaping the corner of his mouth. These are karma lines, the laws of destiny, and yet Ling Fan treats them like common yarn. However, Ling Fan clearly has no intention of wasting more time. He grips the karma lines tightly, the muscles in his arms bulging like ancient beasts waking from a long slumber. In the next heartbeat, a force of absolute, raw power explodes from his arms, causing the entire secret realm to begin trembling violently. It isn't just the threads shaking, it's the entire world. The blood-red lightning in the sky vanishes instantly, and the earth begins to crack and splinter under the pressure. Space itself begins to fracture like a broken mirror. Even more terrifyingly, the heaven-swallowing evil immortal's massive phantom is being dragged down from the heavens. Inch by inch, pulled by those very threads. The ground beneath Ling Fan's feet collapses as he fully extends his arms and lets out a low, focused shout. Break. A thunderous snap echoes, not through the air, but directly within the deepest depths of everyone's souls. It is a sound that defies logic. Then comes a rapid-fire succession of hundreds, perhaps thousands, of snapping sounds. Those lines of karma, which represent the very laws of existence and fate, are being torn apart by the most primitive, savage, and unreasonable display of strength imaginable. The heaven-swallowing evil immortal feels as though he's been struck by 10,000 hammers. His massive phantom is instantly covered in cracks, and he coughs up a mouthful of his essence, his voice finally filled with terror. At this moment, Long Outyen completely breaks down. He falls to his knees with a heavy thud, frantically kowtowing toward Ling Fan, his dignity long forgotten. The other surviving prodigies, seeing this as their only hope for survival, follow suit and begin to bow in desperation. To be honest, they look quite pathetic. They are no longer proud chosen ones. They are just mortals whose hearts have been shattered by a miracle. Yet, the evil immortal has also been driven to madness. Watching everyone kneel toward Ling Fan, his last shred of sanity is ignited by a mixture of humiliation and fear. He lets out a piercing, ragged howl. He calls Ling Fan a monster, screaming that if he cannot live, then this world, these bloodstones, and Ling Fan himself will all be buried with him. As his words fall, he throws himself toward the sky, sacrificing his remaining soul to the heavens to force the activation of the world-extinguishing millstone array. The entire realm enters a state of apocalypse. The sky collapses like shards of glass, revealing the deep, silent void of the abyss beyond. The ground sinks violently toward the center, where a massive black millstone, forged from countless fragments of spatial laws, begins to manifest in the heart of the secret realm. As it rotates, it flings out endless spatial rifts, acting like a cosmic meat grinder that shreds mountains, rivers, and forests alike. It is a terrifying sight to behold. Everything in its path is annihilated. Chu Tianhua and Chu Tianjiao fight desperately to withstand the omnipresent spatial blades, their faces turning pale with pure dread. And what about Ling Fan? Well, he simply looks down at his half-bag of painstakingly gathered 10,000-year sunset soil. To be honest, his priorities are quite unique. His plan is simple: tie the bag shut and leave this cursed place. But as fate would have it, at the exact moment he leans over to secure his prize, an exceptionally massive spatial storm howls past his side. Ling Fan himself remains completely unmoved. However, we see a pitch-black spatial rift snap shut in an instant. The soil is gone, and even the burlap sack has vanished into the void. Time seems to stand still. Around him, space collapses, the earth sinks, the evil immortal laughs maniacally, and the prodigies wail in despair. But in Ling Fan's world, only one thing matters: his fertilizer is gone. In the next heartbeat, a killing intent 10,000 times more terrifying than the millstone awakens within him. The millstone halts, space freezes, the evil immortal's laughter is cut short, as if someone had suddenly strangled him. The trembling, heaven-swallowing evil immortal hears Ling Fan speak, each word heavy with menace. "Give me back my dirt." As he speaks, he slowly clenches his fist. The friction of his muscles produces a thunderous roar, like the very birth of a universe. He doesn't care about laws, arrays, or immortal arts anymore. He pours his purest, rawest fury into this single strike. He has no interest in these illusions. All he needs is one punch to settle the score. When the punch is thrown, the world in front of it simply ceases to exist. There is no light, no sound, and no logic. Space and time vanish. At the tip of his fist, only a tiny, purely black void remains, as if nothingness itself has descended upon the scene, and its only purpose is to negate everything in existence. Consequently, when that world-extinguishing millstone, made of spatial laws, meets the fist, there is no explosion, no roar, and not even a struggle. It is simply erased, starting from the edges, in a silence that is far more terrifying than any noise. Then, the black hole touches the heaven-swallowing evil immortal, the ancient being who nearly ended the lives of the Sky Blue Realm's top prodigies. The ancient being didn't even have time to scream before his physical form, his karmic memories, and every trace of his existence were swept away. He wasn't just turned to ash, he was effectively deleted from reality. Yet, the punch wasn't finished, continuing its path to erase the very walls of the secret realm. After obliterating the millstone and the evil immortal, the fist slammed into the realm's boundary with a crisp, bone-chilling crack that would make anyone's skin crawl. The blood-red sky shattered like a dropped mirror, as billions of black cracks instantly raced across the entire dimension. A moment later, the entire independent world was blown apart from the inside by that single strike. Spatial fragments flew everywhere, and the ground beneath everyone's feet simply vanished. They all plummeted downward. When the survivors finally opened their eyes, they were tumbling back onto the soil of the central province like falling dumplings. High above, a massive, pitch-black void remained in the sky, as if someone had physically bitten a chunk out of the heavens. It was a truly gruesome sight. Long Out Yin, the holy maiden of Yaoqi, Chu Tianhua, and Chu Tianjiao, every one of them lay paralyzed on the ground, trembling too hard to even look up. Just glancing at that black hole made their scalps tingle with dread. But then, the sound of someone dusting themselves off drifted from the ruins as Ling Fan stood up. He rose from the rubble, grumbling under his breath while holding the tattered remains of a burlap sack labeled Bountiful Harvest. It was, quite sadly, completely empty. He looked down at the bag, then scanned his surroundings, growing more annoyed by the second. To be honest, he found the quality of this secret realm quite lacking. He complained about the poor soil and the terrible wind that had wasted his entire afternoon. With a huff, he tossed the ruined sack aside and shouldered his hoe. That hoe hadn't left his side once. As he turned to leave, the various holy sons and maidens who were sprawled on the ground reacted instantly. They scrambled backward as if they'd seen a ghost. For every step he took forward, they retreated too, until a wide path opened up through the valley. Everyone bowed a full 90 degrees, holding their breath and not daring to make a sound. It was as if they were seeing off an ancient god walking among mortals. Chu Tianhua and Chu Tianjiao quickly scrambled up from the dirt to follow him. They were being very well behaved, as one might expect under the circumstances. As they walked, Chu Tianjiao's eyes grew brighter. He looked at the back of the man carrying a simple hoe, then looked up at the massive black hole in the sky. It was as if a bolt of lightning had struck his mind, bringing a sudden, profound realization. Sword paths, laws, and divine arts, all of it suddenly seemed trivial. In the face of absolute power, all those fancy techniques were nothing but illusions. His lips trembled with an excitement that shook his entire frame. He kept muttering that he finally understood. The way produces one produces two produces three, and three produces all things. But he declared that the origin of all things was simply raw power, and from this day forth, he would abandon the sword to lift weights and focus every single drop of spiritual energy on tempering his physical body. Ling Fan, however, had no time to worry about his disciple's strange epiphany. He was still mourning the loss of his half-sack of fertilizer. By the time we return with him to the small courtyard behind the Qingyun sect, the sky has already begun to darken. Losing those precious seeds had left him in a rather foul mood. But as he rummaged through the tattered remains of that burlap sack, he managed to shake out a small handful of 5-colored spiritual soil from the very bottom. It wasn't much, but it was certainly better than nothing. His eyes lit up instantly. With the utmost care, he sprinkled every last grain of that incredibly precious fertilizer into his spiritual rice field, which, to be honest, was the most attention he'd paid to anything all day. Sure enough, the rice stalks became a vibrant, dripping green right before our eyes, their leaves looking more spirited than ever. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless.